Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Edward Sanshin Oberholtzer. I'm the resident priest and guiding teacher here at the Joseph Priestley Zen Sangha in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. We're a part of Empty Moon Zen. Interesting concept, anger. There's something delicious, something almost intoxicating about anger. Intoxicating, now, there's a word that evokes more than one precept. There are so many ways to parse a word, so many ways to pick apart a concept. Let me begin with the three poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. We each have our own. I lay claim to anger as mine, and so permit me to indulge, to examine it. Hot and cold, righteous and self-serving, constructive and destructive, anger in all its righteousness and its unconscionable glory. And perhaps here's a place to start. When I began my practice of Zen, if not in the Dark Ages, then at least in the pre-modern era, we chanted the Gatha of Atonement, acknowledging greed, anger, and ignorance as the source of all of our evil karma. Today, in this more enlightened era, enlightened, of course, with a small e, we've replaced anger with hatred, a far less loaded, a term more on point. Our precept ceremony reminds us not to harbor ill will, where earlier renditions would not have us indulging in anger. But I'm sure I'm not alone in those feelings of anger welling up. Let me step back for a moment. I used to ride a bicycle to work, back when I lived in Massachusetts. It was a 5-mile ride through shaded, tree-lined suburban streets, a great way to set the mood for the coming workday. Energizing going to work, a way to unwind on the way home, soothing, relaxing. One morning on my way to work, I pulled up to a stoplight in downtown Winchester. The driver in the car to my left pulled down his passenger side window, leaned across the front seat, and demanded angrily that I get out of the road, that bicycles had no place in traffic, that I was interfering with his driving. I don't recall the exact sequence of events or the words exchanged. What I do remember is that feeling of rage welling up within me, of being overtaken by it, of knowing in that moment that I wanted nothing more than to drag the driver from his car and beat him bloody. And I do realize how comical that sounds, coming from someone who even 20 years ago was, if not an old fart, then an advanced middle-aged fart. I remember getting off my bicycle and offering to have it out with him on the side of the road. Fortunately, for me, the light changed. I remounted my bike, he put his car in gear, and we both went our merry ways. We talk of those three poisons, greed, anger, and ignorance, although aren't greed and anger the offsprings of ignorance? As I said of the three poisons, mine is anger. Even if I've become an expert at hiding it from the world at large, and from myself in particular, at least I've convinced myself that I've hidden it. There is a cartoonish view of Buddhists that we are beyond anger. We can turn to the precepts where we find Bodhidharma's formulation of the 9th precept, this earlier version. Self-nature is subtle and mysterious in the realm of the selfless Dharma, not contriving reality for the self. It's called the precept of not indulging in anger. Not advancing, not retreating, not real, not empty. There is an ocean of bright clouds. There is an ocean of solemn clouds. Transforming suffering into wisdom, I vow to take up the way of not indulging in anger. Not no anger, but not indulging in anger. Now, anger comes in many guises. The righteous anger that arises when we see injustice, the righteous anger we share in the battle hymn of the Republic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. If only had been there at the side of the road that day. And there's the slow, corrosive anger that lingers quietly and spreads its tentacles out, poisoning whatever it touches, an anger that was best expressed by William Blake in his poem, A Poison Tree. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles, and with soft, deceitful wiles, and it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright, and my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine, and into my garden stole. When the night had veiled the pole, in the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. You would look long and hard and never find a better set of instructions on indulging anger than those laid out by Blake. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. And let's not forget the volcanic rage that erupts out of seemingly nowhere. This anger at the stoplight was that all-consuming, burning anger that explodes, that grabs you by the throat, that blinds you, the rage that drove Achilles, that mania that formed the crux of the Iliad, burning, incandescent. For he is like a refiner's fire. I'd like to say I know that biblical passage from Malachi in the Old Testament, but to be honest, I pulled it out of my old recording of Handel's Messiah. Still, it brings to mind that tale of another, though perhaps not very different, refiner's fire that we find in the Blue Cliff Record, a story that might have some bearing on this. A monk asked Dongshan, when cold and heat visit us, how should we avoid them? Dongshan said, why not go where there is neither cold nor heat? The monk asked, where is there neither cold nor heat? Dongshan said, when it is cold, kill yourself with cold. When it is hot, kill yourself with heat. And here we have Dongshan's refining fire and the invitation to turn towards it. The fires at the end of a kalpa, the end of an epoch, can herald the start of a new era. And this is the interesting thing about rage, about that all-consuming anger. It passes. If you give it space, it will drop away as all things drop away. Anger is a part of our nature. It arises, it passes away. Don't condemn it. Don't indulge it. I worked for the Massachusetts prison system as an attorney many, many years ago, and one of the things I came to appreciate was that many of the prisoners doing time for crimes of violence were no different than you or me. Often they simply had opportunity in the midst of rage. They could reach out and close their hands around a gun, and in that moment, change a life forever. It takes practice, long hours of practice to know in your bones that anger that seemingly overwhelms you will pass, that all things pass. Anger, rage arises like the kalpa fire, and if we're lucky, burns away. We might heed the words of that near contemporary of Blake, Charles Lamb, who wrote, anger in its time and place may assume a kind of grace. It must have some reason in it and not last beyond a minute. If To further lengths it goes, it does into malice grow. 'Tis the difference that we see twixt the serpent and the bee. If the latter you provoke, it inflicts a hasty stroke, puts you to some little pain, but it never stings again. Close in tufted bush or brake lurks the poison-swilled snake, nursing up his cherished wrath in the purlieu of his path, in the cold or in the warm, mean him good or mean him harm, whosoever fate may bring you, that vile snake will always sting you. There is an ocean of bright clouds, and there is an ocean of solemn clouds. Back in Winchester, the traffic light changed. The car and I moved on. The rage subsided. It was, in the end, a lovely autumn day. Thank you.